a conference somewhere or at something, and it just reminds me that our world is a small world, and we circle back around, and all we're doing is extending our network. And I can't thank you enough for welcoming me so warmly as you have. I am a Texan, born and bred. I live in Fort Worth. We're near a tiny little suburb of Dallas, but we do have a great airport. You guys can come visit us really easy. I went to TCU, which I know is sensitive this week because there are a couple of purple teams playing tomorrow, and that's all I will say about that. I did go to TCU, and when I graduated, I started in museum work. Now, I was there long before we had museum studies, etc., etc. My degree's in journalism. And about halfway through my junior year, I took my first art history course, and I said, oh my goodness, this would be great. It's a little bit of everything. It's a little bit of history, and it's a little bit of science and chemistry. And I talked to one of my professors who says, you should think about museum work, because museum work, it's education without managing a classroom. It's history without having to learn the entire world. You just get your little segment. And I said, yeah, but you know what? I married young, and one of us has got to graduate soon. I don't have time to go back and study. I sure don't have the money to go get a lot of graduate degrees. And this very wise person said, not all museum employees are curators. Look at the service areas. Look at the work areas. They all have accountants. They all have PR people. They all have HR people. Sometimes in the smaller museums, these are all the same person. We know that. But that is what I did. I got my degree in journalism, and I went to work in the publications department and public relations department at the Kimball Art Museum. Are any of you familiar with the Kimball?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the Kimball Art Museum is a very well-funded art museum in Fort Worth. It's encyclopedic, but just the finest examples from all over the world. And I went there thinking that this was normal. So let's just say that my career has been downhill ever since. But it has been a wonderful, wonderful roll down the hill. I was young, and I just handed Bob $40. I mean, it's true. I took my first museum job in 1980. I tell some groups that I was the first junior high intern ever at the museum, but I'll level with you all. It was a great experience, and I learned a lot. And I went to work then. My next position was across the lawn at the Amon Carter Museum of American Art. That's where I came to really appreciate and understand American history. I had a taste of beauty, and now I was beginning to understand context and interpretation, and they had a photography collection, which was a great love of mine. It was a really important time. And I was glad that I was there, and I met this scrawny guy from New York named Bob Workman. And we became part of a very productive team. And now, even when we look back, we look back on those as sort of glory days. Well, after that, the Amon Carter went through some building projects. And I don't know if any of you have ever tried to work in a construction zone. Yeah, it was tough. And coupled with the fact that those of us who worked in a public component had no public, so it was very difficult to do our jobs. And so it was a time when several of us decided that we would just move on and advance our careers and extend our networks. That's what I tell everyone. You're not really leaving, you're just extending your network. And I went to work at the 6th Floor Museum at Dealey Plaza. I rode the train, which was an experience of its own, and I arrived the same week as the Zapruder film. And if any of you know what that is, you will know that it became an immediate exercise in setting up a rights and reproductions program, for licensing. Not only did it create a little revenue for the museum, but it kept it out of Pepsi commercials and things like that. I mean, it was an important part of work. That was my first real history experience with a museum. I went because I wanted to be there for the 40th anniversary, because I knew that by the 50th, all the players would be gone, and they are. They celebrated, well, they commemorated just this last fall, the 50th anniversary, the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And when I was there, I could do so much Kennedy trivia. I mean, if you were ever in a Trivial Pursuit tournament, you wanted me on your team. So I have to say, when we put it up yesterday and they said, you're doing a talk at the Ambassador Hotel at dinner, just for a little moment, just for a quick moment, I thought, yeah, but then I decided, hey, it's Kansas, we're okay. So those were my 3 museum experiences. And I had been a participant in TAM since the early 80s. Oh, oops, maybe I'm waiting too much. Or maybe we've lost it altogether. Does this help? Am I too far? Okay, there we go. If I don't move at all. Okay, yes? Yeah. Okay. I had been...
Wiggle it a little. The microphone.
There you go. That's right. I had... let's try different things.
Turn it off.
Okay, drinking game. Everybody have a How's that? Okay. I will try not to wiggle the podium. I have been a member of TAM since the early 80s, and that was where I came to understand community. That's where I came. That's where, turn it off and on.
Reboot.
Reboot. That.
So that's symptomatic.
I don't have any other bad pressure.
That's okay.
I bet you can yell.
If it doesn't work, I'll yell.
She might take over your area. Watch out. She might have a I'll just find you.
Tell me a story, Bob.
That's all right.
You know, fun.
Okay, he's going to go get another microphone. And until then, I'm going to shout. How's that? I'll shout into the camera as well. There you go. I came to understand the important function of a museum association, which is this is where you meet your colleagues, you understand who has which expertise so you know who to call, and you get to know each other well enough that you are not afraid to call with dumb questions. And that is a really important part of what we do. I'll tell you about my favorite movie as it relates to museums. Did anybody see, several years ago, it's called The Sixth Sense. And there's this adorable child who sees dead people. You know, I see dead people. And Bruce Willis plays a psychologist who's trying to help him. And it is not until the end of the movie that you realize that the psychologist is one of those dead people. And the child looks up into the camera and says, they don't know they're dead. And I have met some museums like that. As I have traveled traveled around in Texas to our museum community, and we have a lot. You heard Bob talk this morning about the IMLS Museum Universe data file, and according to that, we have over 2,200 in Texas. And I thought I had a lot of members until I heard that number. I'm thinking my percentage went down a lot. But when I took this job in 2008, it wasn't 19, it was 2008, I fell in love with small museums. You know, I'd started this big, fancy museum and then sort of worked my way to smaller museums. When I worked at the 6th floor, it was the smallest museum I had ever worked at. There were only 50 staff members, only 50. And then I got to know some of our people who were doing extraordinary things with one person or a half of a person or only with volunteers. And I'm here to tell you that changed the way I would write about volunteers, because I would always refer to, and still always refer to, museum staff, parentheses, paid or unpaid, because there's some great work that's being done that way. So that's kind of the story of me, and thank you for letting me shout at you. The Summerly thing, and I told you a little bit. Oh, wait.
Yeah,
No,
we got a mic.
it wasn't
We
me.
got sound.
We got
Yeah.
Thank you. But you're going to have to let go of the cord. Okay.
Thank you.
I don't see why I couldn't talk over here. My notes are over there, but I can't see them. I told my optometrist when I went just last week for a checkup, I said, "You have made me such a better speaker." No, thank you. I said, "You have made me such a better speaker." And she says, "Oh, how is that?" And I said, "Because I can't see my notes. That really encourages me to look at the audience." And, that's an important part. Okay, well, we're getting ready to start the drinking game because the title of my talk, if you read it in the program, is called Whack-A-Mole and the Versatile Museum Professional. Has everybody played Whack-A-Mole? Have you been to the arcade with your kids or grandkids or late night pizza and beer buddies? You do not have to raise your hand. And play Whack-A-Mole. It's this table kind of game, and the little moles jump up and you have a giant mallet and you hit them back into the hole, and you get points. I'm not sure how, but you get points. And the point of the game is you never know where the mole is going to jump up, so you're just constantly trying to guess and trying to anticipate. Well, how many of you can relate to that in your museum career? Yes. Okay. So I am going to read off a few things that we might do in our daily life. And if you do this in your Whack-A-Mole game, you get to take a drink. Okay? Are you ready? Who has administrative responsibilities? Cheers.
Drink twice, Bob.
Who has curatorial responsibilities? Cheers. Who has operations, security, facilities responsibilities? Cheers. Isn't that all of us? Who has education responsibilities? Who has development or fundraising operations or responsibilities? Cheers. That's all of you, actually. And that's something that Bob said this morning, that you don't turn this off. You are a representative of your organization everywhere. And so you are always fundraising because you are always stating the case for your museum. Now, there are some things that make me crazy. And I'm going to admit to you what those are. The problem with playing Whack-A-Mole is you stare at the Whack-A-Mole table and you're trying to figure out where they're coming. And the more you look down, the less you look up. So if you're working along and you're staring at your desk and all the things that are on your desk and the things that are on your to-do list, you're looking down and you're not looking up at the bigger picture, and you're gonna miss some opportunities. Now here's some of the things that make me crazy, and if it makes you crazy too, drinking game. Membership renewals. Oh man, that's a hard one for me. Workshop registrations. Maybe it's just museum associations. I'll do it twice for you. And oh dear, that financial part, processing the check requests and checking the budget and all those things with numbers. Cheers, everybody. Now, part of the problem when you lose sight and you're not looking up, you may be getting your stuff done, but in the long run, you're not getting your mission advanced. And what happens if you play whack-a-mole for too long? What happens? You burn out. Now, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I suspect there are some people in this room who have had a bout of burnout and have had to sort of talk yourself into that car in the morning to drive to the office. Cheers, everyone. And the difficulty with that, don't give yourself a hard time. It happens to all of us. The difficulty is we don't catch it fast enough. We don't catch it until it's too late. And then we may not have it in us to recover. And that's one of the great things about a community like this, is you can help each other know before you get to that point. If you have colleagues who didn't show up to this meeting and you were looking for them, call them up when you get back and say, hey, I missed you in Salina. What are you doing? Oh, I'm just so busy, I could not get away. Really? Really? I'm here. You can't. At our conferences, we sell a lot of day tickets. Just a day ticket. And that's because we really want you there. Because there's something you get from being together that you don't get from anything else. And okay, if you can't take 3 days off and you can't travel and you don't have any budget, whatever, come for a day. Come for a day and sit with people who understand what you're doing. And that's what y'all are doing tonight, and I think that's really grand. Plus, you've been patient with me. All right, this can be a drinking game too. I can make almost anything into a drinking game.
It's true.
Here are the things that we have in common. There are actually a lot of things we have in common. As I've been listening today, we have similar challenges. We celebrate similar victories. We have obstacles. But there's 4 things that I think, well, let's just see. How many of you feel like you have too little time to get everything done? Cheers. How many of you feel that you have too few staff, parentheses, paid or unpaid, to get things done? Cheers. How many of you feel that your budget is too strained to get things done, that there are financial issues? Yeah. Let's drink twice to that. What do you say? And finally, how many feel like you just sometimes can't summon the creativity to get things done? There you go. This is what we have in common, and this is one of the things that we learned about also when we went to our convening of the State Museum Associations. I don't want to go into too much detail because I know Lisa's including that in her report tomorrow morning, but we had a marvelous experience. All the State Museum Associations, for the first time in decades, got together at Crystal Bridges. AAM organized the meeting and IMLS funded it which means the only way we could get there is if they bought the plane tickets and bought lunch and the whole thing. It was quite an investment. There were 96 of us representing 46 different associations. Now, those of you who have not been participating in the drinking game are going, yeah, we got 50 states. That's not enough. Well, states that are less fortunate than Kansas and Texas, and they're little bitty, tend to go together. So we have several who are working together, and you all know that our neighbors Colorado and Wyoming work together. So we had every state represented by at least one person, and in most cases two. And you all should be very proud that not only was your director there, but the president of your board was there too, and that's where I met Shannon. Y'all should give these two girls a hand. Now, we were in an extraordinary place, Crystal Bridges. I don't know if any of you have been there to visit. It's pretty swell, and I have to thank Bob for building it. I mean, that was it's incredible. And it was a great environment for us to talk, and that's really what we did. We spent 2 days talking because, number one, we didn't know each other. Because much like the state associations, you get the people who can get there. If you're not convening in an area that people can get to, they can't come. Well, we got to see everyone at one time. And we got to talk about defining some things. We didn't understand, like, who's in charge. We didn't understand, like, are we part of AAM? Or, you know, what's our relationship with the regional associations? And what's our relationship to one another? And it was really inspiring and empowering. And what we learned was not necessarily good news. What we learned was that the state museum associations really need to build capacity. That there are a lot of the states that really don't have anybody. And, you know, we've already talked tonight about how, you know, Lisa works a part-time job, but she probably does a lot more than part-time. There are many state associations that don't even have that. They're totally volunteer run. And it was really revealing. When we walked around the room, you know, come stand here if this describes you. And when they said, any association that has more than one staff member, full-time staff member, come over here. And you want to know how many of us there were? No, there were more than 0. 6. That's exactly right. I don't know who said that. 6. Good guess. Good guess. Well, if we weren't trying to get to the auction, we'd have a drinking game and try to figure out which ones those are. But we're not going to do that. What I wanted to say about that was that it was eye-opening not only for us, but eye-opening for our national partners. They had no idea. Because what happens is, on the national level, they're like, ooh, let's do a salary survey, and then contact the state associations and say, hey, would you mind asking all of your people to do this survey and then send us the information? And sure, because I don't have my own work to do. I don't mind doing that. And you know what? They might get to talk to me or get to talk to Lisa, but in some of these states, there's not even anybody to talk to. So they wonder why it is that when they do something like that, the data is skewed. Well, because you're not getting to everyone. And you know, my personal bias, which I will just throw in since we're good friends by now, there is a lot of country between the East Coast and the West Coast.
Yeah.
And it's about time that we stand up for ourselves. So anyway, to make a long story or a short story even longer, I should say, next week, I have been invited to address the board of the IMLS.
Yeah.
How about that? what I'm going to say is that state associations are essential because we are closest to the museums, to the people that you all want to serve. Now, some of you know about IMLS. Some of you have written one of their wonderful grants. And you know that they fund libraries up here, and they fund the museums, sort of, down here. And nothing against libraries, I love libraries, but I'm ready for that to get a little more equal. And that's what I'm going to say next week. Now, what I'm talking about, there are three of us, and we've kind of divided up all the work that state associations do. We're talking about things like advocacy and economic impact. We're talking about things like state partnerships and collaboration. And I am talking about the importance of a conference. Because a conference is much more than the information that is distributed. Let me see if I can find my notes and where I am. Okay, here are the things that happen at a conference. If you have any wine left. There is the obvious, the educational, informational exchange of ideas. That's important. There is inspiration. If we're lucky, if we come in the right frame of mind and we listen to some of these new ideas, we can be inspired to try again and go back out there. There's also professional development. How many of you have learned something in the last couple of days that you really didn't know before? And it's going to help you in your job when you go back. My hand is still up because I've learned a lot from you guys. The other thing that they do is expands the network. And you've heard me say this, that everyone you know becomes part of your network. And it's sometimes sad